Hello and welcome to an after-action report for Combat Mission Red Thunder. Today I'll be playing a meeting engagement set in Eastern Europe in July 1944. I'll be commanding the German army, while my opponent, Chemical Trug Zero from the Sliltherine forums, will lead the Soviet forces. Under my command is an understrength Panzer Division escort company consisting of just 2 platoons. First platoon consists of 3 rifle squads, each with its own Panzerschreck detachment, supported by 2 machine gun teams. The platoon is currently riding on the back of 3 Panther G tanks. Second platoon consists of 3 rifle squads without the Panzerschreck detachments or machine gun teams. They are supported by 2 Puma 50mm armoured cars. Like this one here, stuck in the mud at the very start of the battle due to wet ground conditions. At the southern end of the map, I have a small base of operations, where the company HQ is stationed alongside 5 medium mortar teams. Additionally, the Axis enjoy air superiority, with 2 Junkers 87s en route. Here's the brief. Our objective is to cross the river and capture North City from the Soviets. There are 2 possible bridge crossings. I've identified the eastern bridge as the more favourable option due to the terrain. A large residential block in this area provides cover for a house-to-house attack, allowing for a more protected approach to the objective from the east. Meanwhile, the western bridge is surrounded by farmland with open spaces and minimal cover. A dried up riverbed runs northwestward in this area, which I want to avoid sending men or tanks through. This leaves a narrow gap as the only viable path for an attack. Since 1st Platoon is the larger unit and has the armour support, it will lead the attack across the eastern bridge. Meanwhile, 2nd Platoon will remain at the western bridge to guard against any Soviet advances. I expect to be heavily outnumbered in infantry, but have superior firepower thanks to the Panthers. The plan is to methodically bombard suspected Soviet-occupied buildings with high explosive rounds as we advance. Having learnt a hard lesson in previous matches, I decide to disembark quite far away from the riverbank. An eager Panther crew quickly spots Soviet infantry on the other side of the river and wastes no time opening fire. Four minutes into the battle, we've already made several partial spots, including an unidentified piece of armour near the western village. The early stages of this battle are all about preparation. With the bridge in sight, it's crucial not to rush in, especially with inferior numbers. A mortar bombardment is called to soften up the target area while my men get in position to attack.
Ich war gerade dabei, mein Buch zu Ende zu lesen. Zum 10. Mal.
I move a Panther out of concealment to see if we can spot the unidentified armour we scouted. I direct the commander to the target, and he fires a shell straight into the front hull of the T-34, sending it into the Shadow Realm. Initially, it appears the Soviets have a much larger presence on the western bridgehead rather than the east. The 2 Pumas engage from concealed positions, picking off infantry. At 6 minutes into the battle, I decide to take advantage of the lack of resistance and push a Panther across the bridge. Meanwhile, the other 2 tanks pound buildings with HE shells to suppress any machine guns or anti-tank rifles. Luckily, a slope on the north riverbank provides a perfect staging ground, allowing me to slowly trickle troops across without harassment. I move one of the Pumas east to assist with the attack, as it's no longer needed to defend Westbridge. The Soviets have likely abandoned the buildings at the top of the slope in favour of the streets behind them, seeking cover from my HE bombardment. That is, until I spot a submachine gunner who manages to take out a Panther commander with a couple of bursts. At this point, the Stukas have arrived on the battlefield, but they are unable to spot any good targets on their own and simply circle, searching for something to engage. The second Panther crosses the bridge. With the majority of 1st Platoon occupying the northern river embankment, mortar fire begins to bombard the houses further back. Once the bombardment is complete, we will begin moving house to house, street to street, clearing the area. The next wave advances to the first row of buildings, with the tanks taking the flanking roads. The plan is for the infantry to advance through the buildings on the left and the right, avoiding the central corridor. The Panthers will take up the flanking roads, unleashing destructive high explosive fire into the complex. We quickly discover the enemy armour is positioned here, complicating the plan. The last Panther is brought across the bridge. Another T-34 attempting to snipe through a keyhole position is taken out. The Puma quickly pops smoke and reverses out of harm's way. However, it gets stuck in the mud and spins its wheels helplessly. Luckily, it's obscured by the deployed smokescreen. The Panther, however, is not hidden by the smoke and bounces around. Meanwhile, the other Panther crew gets extremely lucky as it appears the T-34 gunner was asleep. Due to some excellent repositioning by my opponent, the lucky Panther, having pushed up too far, is taken out. A shell penetrates the side of the turret, killing both the loader and commander. The driver is killed when another shell strikes the vehicle before he has chance to evacuate. The gunner is then submachine gunned down as he attempts to flee. To divert my opponent's resources from the main assault, I deploy smoke on the village at the western bridge and begin sending 2nd Platoon across to secure the bridgehead. Now out of mortar ammunition, I dismantle the HQ and reposition the mortar teams and ammo bearers into a more defensive positions, preparing for the worst outcome. It is not long before I get revenge on the cat-killing T-34. Continuing with the plan to move up one row of buildings at a time and clear them out, we are now on the 3rd row. Meanwhile, 2nd Platoon works to find good positions for when the smoke clears. As the smoke clears, it becomes evident that the Soviets were closer than I had anticipated, and a firefight immediately breaks out. Occupying these buildings seemed like a good idea at the time, but the Soviets had strong tank positions that allowed them to fire into the structures. One building collapses, causing 2nd Platoon to begin panicking.
prisoners.
As we move up to the fourth row of buildings, I'm surprised by how few casualties we've taken so far, especially considering 1st Platoon consists of just 3 squads and a few additional detachments. 2nd Platoon's attack across the West Bridge was a disaster, resulting in the loss of the Puma and several men. I decide it's best to pop smoke and pull back. The 2nd Puma had been out of my control for several minutes due to the crew panicking. It is eventually taken out while it fumbles in the mud. Having successfully cleared the first 5 rows of buildings, 2nd Platoon is now positioned well for the final houses in this block. With the 2 remaining Panthers in position, I believe the Soviets have retreated much further back. Within the span of 10 seconds, I take out 2 more T-34s. To be honest, I'm not really sure how this gunner made this shot, while panicked and with no visibility of the enemy vehicle. The buildings I initially thought were empty turned out to be occupied by a significant number of Soviets. As 1st Platoon crosses the allotments, they take heavy casualties. The remaining men break and retreat. This single mistake proves to be so costly that it ultimately loses me the win. With morale at an all-time low, one of the Panthers becomes shaken and starts acting on its own accord. The other Panther, still following orders, is directed to pop smoke and retreat. I request a ceasefire with the Soviets, but my opponent, clearly aware of how costly my mistake was, denies the request. The retreat over at Westbridge goes somewhat better than in the east, though I now realise I only have 1 Panzerfaust left. The shaken Panther, now surrounded by T-34s, is knocked out. The platoon HQ is picked up in the Kubel wagon and taken to safety. The last Panther stays behind to pick up stragglers. The retreat is disorderly, with elements like this machine gun team left behind to delay the enemy. Back on my side of the river, I prepare to defend the bridge crossing. With any luck, my opponent will accept a ceasefire instead of launching an attack. The last stragglers are picked up by the Panther, which then proceeds to make its escape south of the river. The Soviets, realising this, send a T-34 to chase the Panther down. Unfortunately, the T-34 takes a shot while it's on the move and misses. We find ourselves in a situation where the T-34 can't currently see the Panther due to the slope. If we continue across the bridge, we risk an easy shot to the rear armour. However, if we turn the tank around, the T-34 will likely have the advantage and be able to roll up, getting a shot before we can reposition. The best option, as I see it, is to disembark the troops and hope the turret can rotate quickly enough. Quite a poor showing indeed. With all my armour destroyed and my infantry in disarray, repelling a Soviet attack seems unlikely. Fortunately, my opponent doesn't realise the extent of his advantage and believes an attack would carry a high risk of him losing the game. As a result, he opts for a ceasefire. In the end, the battle concludes in a draw. I thoroughly enjoyed playing against Chemical Drug Zero, and I look forward to future battles with him.